My name's Adam McLaughlin, and this is the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Practical ideas to help your church build trust in your community. Hey, welcome to the very first episode of the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. You'll be able to find all of our show notes today at churchmarketingideas.com/001. I'm so excited that you're hanging out with me today, and because of that, I want to give you something free. For the next few days, over the first week, we're releasing 5 episodes. We're going to give something away free every single day for those first 5 episodes, and it's really easy to get something free or to enter into the draw. Just take a screenshot of the podcast while you're watching it right now and tag us on Twitter or Instagram at CMI Podcast. That's at CMI Podcast on Twitter or Instagram. Take a screenshot of the podcast and you'll be entered into the draw. Today's prize is to win a t-shirt from Seth Muse's store online. There's some really cool t-shirts. You can choose whichever one you'd like. You can choose whichever size you'd like. Just take a screenshot of the podcast, tag at CMI Podcast, and we're going to pick a winner. And I'm so excited today for my conversation with Seth Muse. Seth has been in ministry for over 20 years, recently serving as communications director at a thriving church in North Dallas. He's also the host of the Seminary of Hard Knocks podcast, blogs at sethmuse.com, and has his Master of Arts in Media and Communication from Dallas Theological Seminary. Seth specializes in helping church communicators use social media and content marketing to find common ground with their audience to empower them for spiritual growth. After this message from our sponsors, you'll hear my interview with Seth Muse.
Hey, it's Michael from Church Fuel, and if you listen too carefully, you'll probably hear beeps and buzzers and announcements because I'm recording this in an airport on the go from one meeting to another. And I know you can relate because that's the life of a pastor, right? That's the life of a church leader. You're going from one thing to another, juggling a lot of balls, working on a lot of things that are all eternally significant. And with your kind of schedule, it can be so tough to find time to actually work on getting better, to work on your church, to work on leadership development and improvement. And we had that in mind when we built Church Fuel. It's a monthly membership program. All the training is bite-sized. There's courses, there's resources. We'll help you create a ministry plan, shrink it all down to just a couple pages, use it properly. It is really leadership development for people who are busy and kind of on the go. And so whether you're in an airport today or you're doing sermon prep today or you got a big task list, put something on your task list to check out Church Fuel. Go to churchfuel.com, see all the courses and resources that you get when you join. We'd love to serve you. See you on the inside. Bye.
Seth Muse, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
What's up, man?
Listen, I feel like I've been to your house so many times. It's time for you to come visit my house as far as podcasting goes.
Man, I'm in. I hope we have barbecue.
We have like Canadian grade
whatever.
barbecue, which is like microwave from the freezer in a box. So you should bring your own barbecue. I promise you that much.
Sounds good.
No, it sounds disgusting. That's why we come to the States and all we eat is barbecue. Okay, where's the place? Was it Hard 8, the place that you took me for barbecue when I came to visit?
Hard 8 is where we went. There's also 1050. There is Lockhart's.
Okay.
There's, I think, Longhorn Steakhouse, but that's a steakhouse. Rudy's. You have Rudy's.
Listen, we only went to one barbecue place. I have a feeling I need to spend a lot more time in Texas.
Oh man, and that's not even scratching the surface. We were really known for Tex-Mex, so like Chuy's,
right?
And
love
Phoenix,
Chuy's,
Uncle Julio's. These are some they're widespread chains of Tex-Mex that you need to try for sure.
Well, anyway, here's the podcast.
Aren't hungry right now,
right? And the point is that if you're looking for a vacation where you go to eat, you don't come to Canada, okay? That's just, we're all clear about that, and we're all right with that. But, dude, it was so great to get to hang out with you and at Hard 8 Barbecue in Texas. And, we chat about all kinds of things all the time. And one of the things I love about the podcast is that I get to meet people that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten to meet. And I think that's how you and I met, is doing your podcast. I was one of the first guests on your podcast. Maybe the first guest.
The first.
Well, you know what? You are the first guest on my podcast. It's a fair trade. Okay.
Yes.
It's a fair trade. And I'm excited that you're here, and I'm excited for the topic that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a communication shift that senior leaders may not be ready for. So
Right.
listeners, if you are in a church communications position, then you're going to want to pass on the link to this to your senior leader. You might want to not sit down with them and do it at the same time, because you might be really tempted to say, told you so. But
Mhm.
what we want to do in this conversation is create ways that you can not only identify shifts that your senior leaders might not be ready for, but you also might be able to learn ways to articulate those things to them.
Right.
And if you are a senior leader or you're an army of one, first off, please understand we pray for you. We love you. And also we're here to help. So this is
Yeah.
not to bash. This is really to help you reach your community and build trust in your community.
Right.
So
And that's an often the misunderstanding between, I think, senior leadership and communications is that they both really do want the same thing.
right.
They both really do want to see people come to know Jesus, grow in their faith, connect with the community. We want those same things. So it's all from like a point of view of like, hey, we really want to do these things together, but we both have different priorities, different views of the world, different kind of ways of looking at it. And it's like, how can we reconcile those things in our staff so that we can have a unified vision for how we're doing the thing that we both want to do.
Right.
And that's important that we come at it too from a place of humility and not just like, come on, dummies, and that's for the senior pastor looking at the communicator going, come on, dummy, don't you know this is important? And the communicator going, come on, dummy, don't you know that that's not good for anybody,
right.
To look at it from either direction that way.
So Seth, this is a blog post on your blog, sethmuse.com. And so just set us up. What was the thing that triggered this conversation for you? What created the need to create this blog post for you?
Well, I mean, I've just seen it a lot. These conversations are happening in like communication Facebook groups and on Instagram. And I'm just seeing a lot of the same conversation happen over and over again. And for me, just the way I'm wired, I like to step back and go, what is really going on here in the big picture? What are we really struggling with? And as I start to, figure out like, okay, what would I struggle with? What would, other communicators I'm friends with that I talk to, what do they struggle with? And it seemed to be like there's this overarching theme that like when you go to the conferences, you go to that church conference, you go to Engage conference or whatever, and you hear all this great stuff as a communicator, and then they come back and you go, we're not gonna be able to do any of that because there's others in leadership that don't know or don't get or don't believe or didn't hear what we heard and what we believe, what we think. It's like a completely different mindset that's forming by going to these conferences and hearing professionals and hearing people that are having success and going, man, we could do that. We could totally do that. And then you go back and there's somebody there, whether it's a senior leader or somebody else, and you feel like you're being blocked. And so, it's really easy to go, man, senior leaders, what's wrong with those guys? What's wrong with those people? But ultimately the issue is that I think there is a conversation that needs to happen, because as communication professionals learn and grow in this field of how this could work for our church and really improve what we do as a church to meet those same goals that the senior leader wants, the senior leader is not hearing that. They're not getting that. And they're not, and if they are, it's like, it's so not what they're really called to, like they're not called to optimizing a website. They're called to reaching people and talking to people, teaching the Bible and ministering to people. And communication professionals really want to have them be able to do that. But there's a, part of what we do that is that. And I think we're not talking about that and seeing each other as partners in that. It's just a real mess. It's like, it's a real mess right now, because as communication professionals get better and try to take off in one direction, I think to senior leaders, it feels like someone running away with their church, or it feels like someone doing something that's not authorized, or it feels like someone is taking control, or putting a lot of stock and money and time and effort and resources, manpower into something that for me, I don't ever use it. What does it matter? things like that. There's just
Yeah.
not a conversation. And then what that feels like is that senior leaders are just blocking everything. They don't care. And that's not true. So there's just no conversation really happening between your communication, marketing professional and your church that can truly help your church. And the senior leader whose main concern is vision, values, ministry, and could care less about Instagram. They don't post on it. They don't like it. In fact, with all the stuff that's happening in the news, they're scared of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that conversation is, I just noticed, like, I'm hearing, because I'm in both these worlds, I'm hearing both sides of this conversation and going, man, it would be really great if we just talk to each other about this.
Right.
It's like it's communication 101. Like, what's the first step to really reconciling any kind of issues or problems or whatever? It's you talk.
Right.
You talk about it with the people you need to talk about it with. So that's kind of what sparked the blog, is like, I just want to get a conversation started that something is happening. I see a pattern, and I lived through the first pattern I mentioned in the blog, but then it's looking like the same thing, and I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah. So tell us about that first pattern.
Well, the first pattern was, I'm an older gentleman. I am 40. And so when I first started youth ministry, I also did worship ministry. I was 20 years old. That was in the year 2000. In the year 2000, one of the biggest issues facing the church was worship music. And we refer to that in the ministry world as the worship wars, right? When we had literal wars, divisions, churches splitting, churches getting started. And the reason was because we wanted to have some cool music in our church. And we didn't want to play old organ and hymns. Right. It was boring. And, that was the whole thing. And like churches split over this thing. And I was watching, I was part of it. I was on I was a youth pastor. So obviously I was, let's bring in drums. Let's punk rock this place up, Right. And so I look at churches now and go, man, I think, I feel like my side won, but did anybody really win?
Right.
That, nobody really won that. That was a horrifying time. We were listening to, it was before Chris Tomlin knew that fourth chord. It was before, he knew, it was like Delirious was writing a bunch of songs. Passion was still a huge deal for like creating music. And so all these songs were coming out and people were wanting to play them. And, their churches were just not having it. So I established, like, there's this pattern I saw of where the culture of the world, and really in the church, the culture of the church shifted, and it went towards, like, we want some relevant music, because that was the ultimate question, right? Like, the church had a PR problem, and the PR problem was, why aren't you relevant? Why aren't you cool? Why are you so boring? And so many churches sought to answer that question. And so they answered the question with, like, cool music. Let's even play radio songs, stuff like that. Whatever you feel about that, doesn't matter. But we're trying to bring in relevant sounding stuff to the church. Pastors would bring, tanks out on the stage, or, they would, do crazy stuff like that. That's when the era of the massive giveaway started.
Right.
Like, come to youth group, win a car, ridiculous stuff like that started taking place, which is way overkill. Right. But the point is that the music was really the core issue for a lot of that. And churches that responded and created this, what we can now call an attractional model, really hinged on what kind of music you play, because that's a huge part of the service. So anyway, it split churches. The culture shifted. Our people responded favorably, mostly. Many of them did. And the culture shifted. They went with it. And the church resisted. So basically you have people trying to go over here and the church trying to hold them back, and eventually it splits and there's a tear. And that's what we refer to as the worship wars, that time period when all that's going on. Well, today I see a similar thing happening, and it's in our space, where, and it has to do with a lot of the online church, online communities, online, social media, Facebook groups, and, is this real relationship? Does that count as attendance? All these questions that are coming up now, I see in a similar pattern, man.
Right.
I'm seeing a very similar pattern. It's culture shifts. People respond favorably, And here's the church trying to resist again.
So let's dig into a couple of those because, our online relationships, real relationships, this is definitely a shift. And I think probably, I think we're past kind of the stigma of like online dating, right? Like, I think that's pretty well become a norm.
Man, I read the last stat I read on that was almost 40% of today's marriages start online.
Right.
In some form or fashion.
Right. But give us like 10 years ago and it was like you met them where? And all I think is the brother from Napoleon Dynamite. But that's a different story, different podcast.
Right. Which is a funny thing. But at the time, even when that movie came out, the reason that's in that movie is because that's what was going on.
Because it seems so fringe at the time, right?
Yeah. At the time we were like, wow, on his 56K modem, he has a chance to meet somebody and talk to him.
Right.
and yep, he did.
Yeah. So that is an interesting question. Are online relationships, and I think the challenge is how you phrase the question, right? Yeah. So if you say, are online relationships the same as real life relationships? And I would suggest they're not. But I think if you say, are online relationships as valuable or equal to or as beneficial as in real life relationships, then I would say there's probably an argument for that. Like, I value our friendship, and I know if I'm going through something or if I have a question, I can always connect with you. And we're just not physically next to each other to do that in real life all the time.
Which, is not really a major factor at most intimacy levels of your relationship. I mean, do you need a hug? It's like, you don't need a hug for everything, but one thing I do want to say as we get into this too, are they real relationships, is first we need to understand that what I'm not saying is that just because the culture shifts that we should always embrace it. There are lots of things that the culture embraces that we should not embrace. Right. Sure. So I think that we need to make sure we say that. However, what we're talking about is a function, like how do people interact? How do people deal with each other, and how do relationships form? I think what we do as ministers, and I think that's what we are, communication people and pastors alike, we're ministers. You can't go and preach that everybody's responsible for evangelism and then not let them do it in the professional life too, just because they're a communicator. Right. You can't say it's not ministry and then say you're a minister, but what you do is not ministry. That's garbage. So when they go into this world, we have to understand that when we have the opportunity to have relationship with people, that we're not trying to say that it replaces any kind of face-to-face. We're not trying to say that it is better than or worse than. Right. We have to start getting to where we say it is part of. Right. It is part of. And that's all I'm really advocating for, is that in the online digital space, is that pastors start to accept the fact that the culture accepts the fact that digital relationships are part of relationships.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example then, just in a practical sense. Before we hopped on, my wife sent me a text message, and it's not that I have a digital relationship with my wife and I have a real life relationship with my wife. She's my wife, and we happen to interact in real life, and we also interact digitally.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's that's what most of us do. But whenever we're asked the question, is this legitimate? Does this count? The same people who would say, yeah, that's the situation, exactly what you described is true for me, but not for church.
Right.
Like, why not? Like what's different? It's like, I know there's some differences, but like, why discount the whole part of the digital space for the sake of saying that real life, face-to-face is, you can't apply that logic to every other place of your life anyway. Right. You're already living in a way that doesn't reflect that. We've already accepted some of these norms like texting and FaceTiming, and even what we're doing now, video chat over computer, over Wi-Fi. Yeah. I mean, it's a friendship. It's real. I mean, the first time I ever met Kenny Jang, I'd known him for a year. He hugged me. I mean, like that's real stuff, man. It's not, I don't hug strangers. I don't like that. It's weird. If you hug strangers, stop doing it. You're freaking people out. Please stop.
Yes.
But anyway, that's kind of where we're at. I think it's that and I give this example, let me give you an example for attendance. This is where we see this play out a lot.
Sure.
4 weekends in a month. Let's just say that you have a person who first weekend attends church. Second weekend, they stay home, but they watch online. Third weekend, they don't watch online, but they go to home group that night on Sunday night.
Mm-hmm.
Then the fourth weekend, they come to church again. How many times did they attend church this month?
Yeah, that's an important question.
I mean, just give the listeners a second. How many times did they attend? How you answer that question really makes a difference, because how a church leader, a pastor, or even some communications people, we may say they came 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
But you ask that person how many times they attended.
Right.
They're going to probably say 3 or 4 because it counts for them, but it doesn't count for us. And so when they come to church and realize that all this stuff that they've done has not been recognized, appreciated, they feel invalidated, like that doesn't really matter. So why would I do that? Why when I'm on vacation would I stop and watch church if my pastor doesn't count it? I mean, that's not a good reason to go to church, but that definitely is a deterrent.
Sure.
If your pastor gets on stage and goes, hey, don't just watch online. You need to be here. You need to be here. Well, the people have kind of moved on from physical a presence being what counts as attendance. And I would say that in the culture today, what counts as attendance is attention.
Sure.
If they give you their attention, then they have given you their attendance. I don't know how many businesses have online webinars and seminars and conferences they go to, and they count that as I went to a conference.
Right.
They meet with their grandkids on FaceTime, on Skype or Zoom or whatever, and they got to see their grandkids and met with their grandkids tonight.
Right.
It's just in our vernacular of how we talk about this, and it makes so much sense to the people who are doing this. But in the church world, we've kind of said, no, that doesn't count.
Right.
Why?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think what we need to shift away from is tracking attendance as being the most important metric that we have.
Yeah,
So,
and that's a good point.
And somebody's just turned me off right there. Somebody's just unsubscribed to our podcast, but that's all right.
Dude, I already shut this place down.
It's a different story, but okay. So let's not think of it in like a don't worry about church attendance mode, right? That's not what I'm saying. Right. What I'm saying is, imagine you had 1,000 people who came to your church every single Sunday, but when you go to do a community event, nobody shows up and volunteers. Like, if attendance is your most important metric, then apparently you're doing all right, but nobody's interested in impacting your community. Nobody's interested in going out and introducing people to Jesus. No one's interested in going on a mission trip. No one's interested in giving. So we have to shift the perspective that attendance is the most important metric. And I think it's Clay Scroggins, and I could be wrong. It may be of somebody else, but somebody said it's unfair to say that watching online doesn't count, but giving online matters.
That was Clay.
It was Clay?
Right. He said that at a Push Pay conference.
So it's interesting that this shift needs to happen.
Yeah. And again, it's not a either or situation.
Right.
It is a pastors, please incorporate what's happening online into your thought process and strategy of ministry at your church.
Right.
Because the less you do that, the more you seem out of touch with what's happening in the culture. And when you stand on that stage and you go, here's how to navigate life, the impression they might get is, well, you don't really take part in where we take part of life. A lot of our life is lived out online. And we can either sit back and go, and let's debate whether or not that should be, they shouldn't do that, or that's dangerous. And sure, there's some dangers. Warn people of that stuff. Fine. But while we debate those things, the culture's moving on.
Right.
And really what we need to decide is, how are we going to redeem that space? How are we going to redeem? Yeah. That's our business, right? We redeem things.
Right.
Jesus redeems, but we are in the business of reconciliation. That's our ministry from First Corinthians, right? It's that our ministry of reconciliation, bringing people back into the fold, back into a relationship with Christ. And where do people hang out 24/7? It's online. We're called to go to them.
Right.
And I'm confused why that's not a mission field, because that's where they are. And if our call is to go, not to call them to us, but to go to them, then why don't we consider that a place to go?
It's a really interesting shift. Why don't we?
I want an answer from you, Adam, right now.
I don't have an answer. And that's my challenge, is that if somebody asks me about Facebook strategy or social media strategy, I'm pretty confident that I can ask them a couple more questions and come up with an answer. What I don't have an answer from, and what I can't wrap my brain around, is why somebody is not willing to embrace the opportunity to go where people are, which is online, right?
Well, I have theories about that, but it will definitely polarize the crowd. I feel personally like that in many churches, our mission, vision, and values are designed to be outwardly focused, but yet our actual practice and implementation of those things is very inwardly focused. It is easier to reach people that are already reached than it is to reach those that are not. It is easier to focus on discipleship instead of evangelism. It is easier to grow someone in their faith and focus on that than it is to get someone who does not think that you have anything to offer them to listen to you. And I think honestly that many of us have gotten in a situation where because attendance is the major metric, it's easier to bolster attendance with people who are already into what you're selling, right? I mean, that's marketing 101. Find your ideal customer.
Right.
And this is where I think with communications, we might need to rethink some of our strategy. We're constantly going out to find people who are likely to want to see what we're putting out. Maybe our strategy needs to align more with a pastor's strategy and start putting out our Facebook ads that target only people that are atheists, or only, things like that, like targeting to actually make some kind of real difference. And that may be why we struggle to get senior leaders to understand that what we do as ministry is because honestly, a lot of it turns out to not be. It's discipleship. It's good things, but it's not really focused towards reaching new people.
Yeah.
Because to reach new people, we have to do things that are weird in this space. You have to make blogs about parks that you should visit. You have to make checklists that help people when they move.
Right.
You have to offer services that, may not happen between 8:30 and 5 on a weekday, that you have to get out and help them cut down a tree that fell on their house. You have to offer things like that. And it has to be front and center. And it's tough to do that. And so when we're able to create content or programs or ministries that really address what people are really wanting, that don't believe, then it changes all of our strategies and it gets really messy really fast. And I think we struggle with that. And I struggle with that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And to me, it's interesting that specifically you titled your blog post about communication shifts that senior leaders might not be in love with, or senior leaders might not be ready for. And it's interesting to me. I would love to see a lot more senior leaders getting input from other generations. And that's not just younger, right? So I believe that everybody should have a mentor that's older than them, and everybody should have a mentor that's younger than them. And I think there's value there. And it's not just, let's get together a group of teenagers to decide how we're going to decorate the youth room. Like, I think we really have to be having real life conversations. And again, that comes back to where we started about how do we create these conversations. So what practical ways do you see to create conversations?
Well, I think we have to bring senior leaders and communicators into the room together to make real decisions about what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we need communication leaders making all those decisions, because most of us don't want to do that. But we have insights and help. And I think senior leaders need to pay attention to data instead of how they feel or stories they heard recently, and really
Right.
pay attention to that kind of thing. And really champion what communicators can bring to the table there, because it is one of the few things I think that can honestly help you really grow a ministry of people who are coming to know Christ, because it's so noisy and you need to cut through it, and it's really hard to do.
Right.
But I think first that we really have to accept that our culture is digitally minded. And if that's not your space, I know that can be really scary, but I think, warn people about things that are out there, sure, but create a strategy for what we are in, not for what we wish we were in. And I think that's a huge mind shift that's way easier said than done. And that goes for all of us. I think we also have to incorporate digital spaces into our ministry mindset. Like we said earlier, I think that's a huge step. We have to say, that's ministry. What are we doing there to reach people? Instead
Right.
of, how are we getting in front of more people? Or how are we reaching 10,000 mark for Instagram so we can have a swipe up link deal in stories? Who cares about that? If that helps you reach more people, great. But if it doesn't, who cares?
Right.
The other thing I think is that, and this is a call for senior leaders, honestly, because the average age of most senior pastors is 54, 52, 54, somewhere in there. And I know that when we start talking about this sort of thing, if your eyes don't cross, most of you don't really care. It's not part of what you've done for so long, and you haven't needed it before. So why need it now? But honestly, you need it now. And
Right.
I know that's scary. It's like you have to learn a new thing, but the thing is, you don't have to learn it. You just have to get with people around you that do know it and let them guide you through it. And I think this is where we have to lead from a place of humility as a senior leader, and
Right.
say that this 20 something that I've hired just to, fart around on social media, as far as I thought, now they're a big part of the strategy of our church. So if they say the best way to reach new people is put out this crazy looking meme on Instagram, I need to trust them with that a little bit.
Right.
And I need to let them do that. That doesn't look perfect like I want it to. It doesn't represent us well, but it works. And that's what we're really after. We're trying to do stuff that gets people engaged. I think no matter how old you are, I think you can really engage in this stuff by allowing the people that God has put around you to do what God has gifted them best to do. I like to say this all the time with leadership. It's one of my things with leading other teams, is that leadership doesn't mean you make all the decisions. It means you make sure all the decisions are made. And that has a lot to do with being able to delegate and organize best people in best slots. Because sometimes I think we think because we're the senior leader, because we're the pastor, because we're over this department, that I have to make all these decisions. And if I didn't put my stamp on it, it's not okay. And that's not always true. In fact, It's very seldom true. I think Andy Stanley would echo that, which is probably where I got that. But the point is that with senior leaders, I think the conversation has to be initiated by you, because communication leaders are middle management. And for us to go to you and say, I think we could be doing a lot of things better, is really hard for us to say without sounding like we're criticizing you.
Right.
And that's not what we're trying to do. Again, bring it all the way back. We care about the same thing you do.
Right.
Just as much as you do. We just get there a different way and want to be part of it in a different way. And I think when you have both of those, sides of the coin really, really going, you get a much stronger ministry that does more actual good than you would if we're just doing one thing and doing that well. I think you've got people around you for a purpose, so use them.
Yeah, and one thing I want to just tag in right there is, none of us are getting younger. So it seems like that,
Not for lack of trying.
Right, as we get older, or previous generations, and I'm not blaming the current older generation than us. I'm saying, historically speaking, this has seemed to be true.
Yeah.
Is that we latch on to what works and we stick with it as we get older. And my question for you is, how do we, in today's day, in where we are today continue to remain flexible as we get older? 10 years from now, how do we remember this conversation and remember what it was like to be in our shoes at our point in time and offer that flexibility to younger leaders underneath us?
Right. For from my experience, and this has a lot to do with just how people are individually wired, for what your thing is. From my experience, I love to learn new things. For me to learn something new and be able to do something new is fun, but not everybody's like that. I think you have to challenge yourself and set it up so that you're challenged. But I think also the ultimate issue is always going to be ego. It is always going to be humility. Can you humble yourself and recognize your limitations and allow someone else to fill in those gaps for you? If you can't do that, your leadership is always going to be limited, always. Because look at any powerful person that is successful, that is doing big things. None of them got where they are by themselves. None of them. They all have teams. They all have people that helped them. They have people that handed them checks out of nowhere for thousands of dollars, that just said, I wanted to bless you. I would love for anybody to do that. So my email is sethmuse.com. But you know what I'm saying? It's like they always had people that were, there that helped them do things because everyone has deficiencies. And when we bring people in that have strengths where we don't, and then we trust and listen to them, we make our organizations better. We make our impact stronger. We just do better. And I think the ultimate issue with us is that as we get older, we all have this sense that because of the experience I've amassed, because of the things that I've learned, because of the stuff I've done, I can point back to it, and that should give me the credit that I need to do something new. And it doesn't.
Right.
It just doesn't always do that. And especially with a generation coming up, you remember what you were like when you were 19 years old? We think we know quite a bit more than we do, but there are things that we knew at 19 that our parents did not know.
Right.
And we always feel like we had to, fight for that or argue about that or whatever. When you find a senior leader that listens to you, if you're 19, 20 in your that range, and you find a senior leader that values your opinion and listens, may not always agree with you, may not always go with it, but listens, stay with them as long as you can and learn from them, because they've mastered something that so many leaders don't.
Yeah.
And it is to put aside ego and listen to those that are younger, that are more inexperienced, because they might have something to offer.
So, Seth, I know that there's leaders listening right now who think to themselves, yes, I'm ready for this shift, and I hear what you're saying and I agree with you, but we don't necessarily have the people or the budget or the resources to create our own communications team at the moment. We have something and we'd like to do what we have with that something. And I'm excited for a new project that you have coming up. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you can always just try to get a bunch of volunteers, and volunteers are awesome. I love volunteers, and people that donate their time and give that are great. You could go hire out contract people and do that. That's a route. You could find donors and backers to supply some sort of salary. But what we found is that, and why we created Church Comm Team, is because there are so many churches that can't afford full-time employees, part-time employees. And even if they do, they'll get an employee. But again, like we just said, they have weaknesses, they have gaps, and you can't afford to buy, or buy. You can't afford to hire anyone else to fill in those gaps.
Right.
So we started Church Comm Team to bring on a leadership to your communications efforts at your church. We do it remotely. We have a team, and this team is designed to come in and basically develop all those strategies and everything like we've been talking about to maximize the power of the impact that your church can have in your community. Because we believe communications is super important, but it's also very overwhelming, and you need a lot of people to really do it well. And so what you could do is hire our firm, our team, and we'll come in and we'll assess things, and we'll set up a team. You'll get great designers, you get great web support, you get great strategy sessions. We meet with you every week via Zoom or Skype or whatever, and we just kind of customize what you need. There are a couple different packages that we can offer at different pay rates, and all of them are a fraction of the cost you would pay for staff. And then for that price, you get a whole team, not just one staff member. So churchcomteam.com is where you can find us and set up a consultation. We'll talk with you through your needs. And it's something I'm super excited about doing. We're helping churches to cut through the noise and on a low budget, and because even if you have 400 people in your church, 100 people in your church, there's a need for this to function where your people are, like we've said earlier, that's where they are, to reach out to them. So we have some packages that are really great to come in and just do things for you and run it. We also can come in and support if you have one staff member that's on comms team and just has all these gaps, needs help, that we come in and support that and fill in those gaps for them, and then kind of teamwork with them to create a strategy for you. They become the point person for us at your church. So pretty flexible, pretty great. And I really love doing it. It's a new service. So we're looking for people that we can help. So if that's you, hit us up at churchcomteam.com.
And I love the whole concept, because even if you are a communications person, instead of having to learn how your website software works and strategize and how each social media channel works and how to keep up with that and how do you do your podcast and why aren't we doing YouTube yet and all these things put together, and graphic design and video editing and audio and who knows what else and whatever might come, right? That's the thing, is you can really say, these are the pieces that I love doing, that I'm really good at, the pieces that matter and I know will resonate in our community, and we need support on the other pieces where I don't have time to learn, or I'm not a specialist, or, frankly, my time's better spent elsewhere. So I just love the whole concept. Again, give us that domain again.
churchcomteam.com.
churchcomteam.com.
Team, COMM team.com.
And Seth, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If somebody wants to learn more about you and what you do, they want to connect with Seth Muse directly, how can they do that?
Well, go to sethmuse.com. You can find the Seminary of Hard Knocks podcast there, or links to that, so you can subscribe and get that podcast. We do that weekly. Megan Ranson and I host that, and it's really, really fun. So go check that out. And then I blog there as well. I have one-on-one coaching, all kinds of other things that I offer through that site, some snarky communications-based t-shirts and, fun things like that. So anyway, sethmuse.com is the best place to go find all that, or go check me out on Instagram.
Sure. Is Instagram your favorite social media channel?
It is right now. I actually opened up TikTok today.
Okay.
And it looks amazing, and I can't flip and work it. I don't know what to do.
But you're also now, a lot of your content showing up on YouTube. So if somebody goes to sethmuse.com, they could track you down. They could find your blog. They could find your podcast. They could find a link to YouTube. They can find you on Instagram, and they can find out if by the time this airs, you're still on TikTok.
Yep. And I haven't linked to that yet because I haven't done anything yet.
Sure.
But again, like I said, I like to learn, and this is a big thing right now. So I'm going to look at it, see what it is. It's pretty entertaining to watch. I just don't know how to make anything yet. So I'm like, I opened it up today. I looked at it for like 30 minutes and it was like, yeah, I'm done with this for now. I don't understand what's going on. That's one of the things that I would take and delegate out. Like, hey, you be the TikTok person. I'll be on camera. You tell me what to do. But we all face those kind of challenges.
For sure. Seth, thank you so much for hanging out. And I really hope that what we talked about today starts some conversations.
Me too. And if you want to talk about that with me more, you can contact me through the website. You can gripe at me, tell me how I'm wrong. That's cool.
Sounds good. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Michael from Church Fuel, and if you listen too carefully, you'll probably hear beeps and buzzers and announcements because I'm recording this in an airport on the go from one meeting to another. And I know you can relate because that's the life of a pastor, right? That's the life of a church leader. You're going from one thing to another, juggling a lot of balls, working on a lot of things that are all eternally significant. And with your kind of schedule, it can be so tough to find time to actually work on getting better, to work on your church, to work on leadership development and improvement. And we had that in mind when we built Church Fuel. It's a monthly membership program. All the training is bite-sized. There's courses, there's resources. We'll help you create a ministry plan, shrink it all down to just a couple pages, use it properly. It is really leadership development for people who are busy and kind of on the go. And so whether you're in an airport today or you're doing sermon prep today or you got a big task list, put something on your task list to check out Church Fuel. Go to churchfuel.com, see all the courses and resources that you get when you join. We'd love to serve you. See you on the inside. Bye.
Hey Adam, my pastor often comes to me on Friday with his sermon notes and ideas for the weekend. They're not usually difficult to pull off, but it usually means I'm staying late on Friday or working Saturday night to get his graphics and slides ready. Any thoughts on getting him to give me the notes earlier in the week?
Hey, good question. Yeah, there's a few things that you can do to help your pastor understand the value of getting you that information earlier in the week. But the best way that I've found, or the best approach that I've seen working at various churches for various pastors with different personalities, is take last week's message and show what you could have done if you had an extra 2 or 3 days to think about it and work on it. So take last week's message and say, hey, pastor, if we had your sermon by Wednesday, we could probably do this and this and this, and show a YouTube clip or a background graphic or some title overlays on the screen. We could do this all live if there's a way that we could get your sermon ahead of time or a few days early, and figure out what that timeline looks for you. I think just by showing the value of getting you that information that little bit sooner helps a pastor or a leader or whoever's speaking understand the greater impact that the effort they've put into their sermon could have if they were able to provide it to you just a little bit earlier. If you have a question, I'd love to answer it for you. Just go to churchmarketingideas.com and click Ask a Question.
It plagues everybody, and it's not just churches. I think sometimes churches think they are fully unique unto themselves, and the reality is there are things about a church that are unlike any other industry on the planet. For example, churches are the only industry I've ever seen that has a weekly deadline. It's always Sunday, right? The NFL has a weekly deadline for like 20 weeks out of the year. Churches have it 52 weeks out of the year, right? So nobody has a deadline like churches. But at the same time, the challenges, the frustrations, the hurdles, all that happens in business too, right? It's a lot of the same stuff. You've seen it too with your work. And so I think what happens is a lot of people tend to be plagued with ambition. We see what other people are doing. We see what's new. We have our great ideas, and the turning of the calendar of a new year. Now that we're in 2020 and everybody can have all their 2020 visions for churches, right? Now it's 2025. We're pushing it out 5 years because we didn't hit our 2020, but I digress. And so we have all these things. The problem is, though, we never stop and think about, what should we stop doing? Like, what should we eliminate? Because if you look at people who are the greatest in the world at what they do, regardless of what they do, I'm talking everybody from Jay-Z to Tiger Woods to Disney. I mean, you name it, whether it's an individual, an athlete, a brand, whatever, the best in the world tend to be laser focused on what they do really well, and they forget everything else.